All right, good evening. Let's call this meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Here.
Present. Mr. Lewis.
Present.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Smythe. Ms. Stevenson.
Present.
Mayor Flynn.
Here. First, we have the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'd move to approve the minutes of the meeting.
I second.
Okay. Was that Ms. Stevenson that seconded?
No, then.
Ms. Barnes. Okay, motion by Mr. Roberts, seconded by Ms. Barnes. Is there any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Are there any additions to the agenda? Okay. Under petitions and communications, I'd like to call on Chief Rex Munt, our fire chief.
Good evening. I think everyone's quite aware of the devastation that occurred from Hurricane Katrina. But what many people may not be aware of is that shortly after that storm cleared, it was very clear to the area down there in Mississippi and Louisiana that many fire departments were greatly impacted, if not completely wiped out, just like their communities. Within just a few days after that storm cleared, the state of Illinois stepped up and put together response programs involving police, fire, and EMS. This evening, we are here to recognize 5 members of Urbana Fire Rescue who participated in that program. They were down there for 2 weeks, as was just mentioned a few minutes ago, in what might be considered a very rough camping trip. It was very hot. It was, in some places, very risky. It was a hazardous working environment, but these individuals stepped forward and said they would take on this challenge to help their brothers and sisters down there who were in need. They were not the only 5 ready to go from Urbana Fire, but that was all we ended up needing to send at this time. There were many others who were also willing to respond. This evening we're going to be honoring Company Officer Keith Sathroff and firefighters Fred Westoff, Rusty Chisholm, Mike Phillips, and Richard Rotrammel. These individuals worked 24-hour shifts, and after finishing those shifts in this location, they then volunteered in what was called Operation Chainsaw, which with that point, and this was created by the Illinois Fire Service in the deployment prior to our individuals responding to New Orleans. And Operation Chainsaw consisted of taking their time to go out with tools to help either resurrect and try to put back in service the New Orleans fire stations that were many completely destroyed, and also to assist those New Orleans firefighters who had been unable to get home to even take a look at their own homes. So they were going out and helping them move furniture, gain access to the homes and so forth, as well as working on the fire stations. And so I just want to bring forward, if I may, all of our individuals. Regretfully, firefighter Richard Rotrammel was unable to join us this evening, but I'd like to bring forward Company Officer Keith Sathroff and firefighters Fred Westoff, Rusty Chisholm, and Mike Phillips to receive from MABUS, the Mutual Aid Box Alarm System, and the Illinois Fire Chiefs Association, the Humanitarian Award. And Mayor Pressing will assist me in this presentation. John, let's step forward up here.
Well, we appreciate what you did, and I know that I was told by Fred that it was 10,000 times worse than what it was shown on television. So this is in honor and appreciation for what you did. It's from the Mutual Aid Box Alarm System and Illinois Fire Chiefs Association, and it's the Humanitarian Service Medal for Hurricane Katrina Louisiana Response and Relief Effort. And it's for outstanding and sustained individual and team actions for the period of September 5th, 2005 to October 14th, 2005 in service within the state of Louisiana Hurricane Katrina Response and Relief Effort. And first we have Keith Sathroff. Thank you. And firefighters Fred Westoff. These may not be in the right order. Rusty Chisholm. You're going to have to exchange these, I'm afraid. And Mike Phillips. Thank you very much. And Richard Rotrammel is not here. Thank you very much. Next, Laura Huth wants to make a presentation on behalf of Habitat for Humanity.
'21.
Yeah, 19. So you guys see the lion's share of the work we build in Champaign, and we did some Pike County build.
Thank you very much, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Okay, next we have Howard Wakeland.
Good, Bruce, thank you. I hope you didn't miss all those good points I made already. Okay. The problem that we have had in asking for a variation, really, when you get down to the brass tacks of what this situation is a difference in idealism between branches of government in Urbana. That's really where it is. We asked for a variation, and I will tell you later why we asked for that variation, but we asked for a variation on a setback to build an apartment, setback from the street. And we started this project in May. We presented preliminary plans to Urbana in June. We discussed this with the planning and code departments several times, including a master meeting once or twice with the city engineer and with Libby and with Bruce and various groups at one time or another, but everybody knew about it. And I said, gee, it would be nice if we could get some of the benefits that they have in the new CCD district down by Granite Performing Arts Center. Specifically, which is a lower parking requirement in that area and a lower setback requirement in that area. Now, that area, as I understand, was designed primarily to work with the university and to allow what is a magnificent building in that area, and I think those were the right decisions. At the same time, you were giving to the university and people who were working with the university advantages not given to others. And in my innocence, I asked about the variation. And I was told, well, you could ask for a variation and it will be considered a minor variation. Not only that, but I received several comments from people in the city who said, you know, we really want to increase the density on the west side of Urbana. Great. This would allow us to add about 10 more spaces. By the time it's all done, maybe as many as 20 more spaces to our apartment building, because the limiting factor is parking. So innocently, and boy was it ever a mistake, I asked for a variation. And I was under the impression that that variation went to, we had to have approval of the city, but after that, we had to have approval by the zoning review committee. At that time, I was a little pensive, but I said, okay, we'll go. So finally, after working, there's just, the time delays are just unbelievable. We finally get to the zoning committee. I think it's in the first part of November, finally, I think. It needs to be checked. And at that point, they approved it. And I must tell you, I would do anything to stay away from appearing before this council. My success with this council has been zero through the years. And I just must be very honest with you. But while I say that, I also want to say to you that Casman Hunsinger has left the city as a contractor, primarily because of council considerations. And he probably was the best builder you had on the west side. He was a neat builder. I think we're reasonably good. But Kevin was better. And he's in Muhammad now. He's not coming back to Urbana. He was told in no uncertain terms where the line was, this is the line or you get out. He says, okay, I get out. The other one is Darrell Fosty, who has slaved to try to repair properties and to fix them up. Darrell now has all of his properties up for sale. I don't know what he's planning on. We are the only other people who have continuously been in West Urbana. Now, Cornerstone comes in and builds up on North Lincoln Avenue. I think it's Cornerstone or Capstone. I keep getting it all mixed up. They're a great organization. I've gone to Alabama. I've visited with them. We've talked about projects. We've never quite been able to make the connection. They're good people. They do good work. And when they get that thing done, it's going to be a good facility. So I'm not negative about that. But they can come in town and make things happen that we never can make happen as a local, small organization. Well, let me come back to the case in question now. So we've done all this review with the code department and with the planning department, and we've gone through the zoning group, and now we're told we have to go to council. I knew at that time I was in trouble. I knew I was in trouble at that time. But nevertheless, we got our architect, and we got my son-in-law to come over and visit with you, and when I left town to go to St. Martin's and have a good weekend, or a good week, pardon me, everything was in order. Everything looked like it was all right. Note, there was never any objection from a citizen in that, in the case when it was presented here. When the case was presented here, there was no citizen that objected to the variation. The objection came between two departments of Urbana city government. Now, if you asked me to give you a grade on the planning department and on the code department, I'd have to give them probably a B+. They're not perfect. But as we have developed, they have been partners. And they work with us. And with Bruce, he will tell you I go into his office and give him havoc every once in a while. But you know what? He's the face of your government when I bring somebody in from Texas, or when I bring somebody in from Alabama, or if I bring somebody in from New York, or if I bring in somebody in from Bloomington, Illinois, trying to make things happen on the west side. And they will tell you in the last 6 months I've about worn them out. Okay. For a variation of about 8 feet, to 5, 8 feet, whatever we want to argue about, we now must scuttle this project. There is a very slight chance, if you people decide you want to do something with us tonight, there's a very slight chance we might make it. And you say, well, why is that? Okay. We are in the student housing business. The student housing business marketing is done in such a manner that you bring a new building on by the 1st of August and no later. Now, we don't want to play the game where we finish an apartment halfway and we have to go out and rent motels or hotels or whatever to take care of students. That's not the way to run a company. And we refuse to do that. We are small. We have a small construction crew. And it means that we really need to start in October to deliver by the following August. We have now built 34 apartment buildings. We know the game. We've built over 50 houses in Urbana. We know the game. We're not novices. So, coming back, here we are, Christmas, good Christmas. And if you, for tonight, said, okay, we're going to give you the variation, I have to go back and really figure, can we make it? Can we make it? And as I sit here right now, I cannot honestly answer that question for you one way or the other. The morning after I got back and found out that we had received a denial, I laid off our construction workers. This morning I placed 24 properties on the market with a client. You never say never, but I will tell you we've already spelled the letters NEVE. We talk about partnerships. I honestly feel that I have had a partnership with the planning department and with the code department. Sure, I go in and we have arguments and we fuss about this and we fuss about that, but the bottom line is I get an answer. And as long as I stay away from council, those answers hold up. When I get to council, they do not hold up. We have now invested in Urbana between $20 and $25 million. Our real estate taxes each year now are very slightly less than $500,000 a year. We have destroyed 45 derelict houses in Urbana. We are the best slum clearance project that Urbana has had, and I will defend every one of those except one. There was one building it hurt me to knock down, but for the sake of the project, we did. I don't mind university competition. I love the university. It doesn't bother me that there's a CCD. But now I'm told by at least one member that what you want to do is go back and design, either redesign B3U or redesign CCD, or come up with a new design. That might be a good project. That's going to take, hey, I wouldn't bet that you're going to come to an agreement on that in 2 months. And I think that's optimistic. So you want us to wait around with our time and our cash and our organization while you're playing games on idealism. This case was a case of about 5 foot or 8 foot. It wasn't about whether the entire zoning ordinance was bad or good, but the idealism of a few people got into this thing, and I've already given you a statement. This is going to be very costly to us, very costly, because we're small. This was our project this year. And it's blown for this year, I think. What are we going to do? We're going to go back and relook at it. I will guarantee you one thing, though. I will never come to you with another design that asks for this council to give me anything. If I don't meet the zoning ordinance, we'll just get out. And I was kind of brought into this because I was encouraged. Bruce will tell you, he said, Howie, yeah, we'd love to have more density on the west side. Libby will say, yeah, Howie, we'd like to get more density on the west side. No, they didn't promise me anything. But certainly the encouragement was there. And certainly we went through those departments. Now the thing that I think is really wrong, is if you continue this way, I think you should fire the entire code department. You should fire the planners. You should fire Bruce. If the decisions are going to be made here, you don't need them. And if their advice is no good, you need to fire them. My opinion is they're good. I know you don't like the way I have sounded off tonight, but I will tell you it's really tough to stay on the west side of Urbana. It's a lot easier to go to a subdivision out there, or build in farmland, or to go to Tolono, or to go to Fisher. Fisher is a great place to build now. Great place, good schools, the whole business. So let's pick up stakes and go to Fisher. But the point is, whether you, and all of the investment that we have made in Urbana, I will tell you honestly, and I can prove it, I have never taken as much as $10,000 out of our developments as a salary or as a capital expense or anything. Every dollar I have ever made in Urbana has been reinvested in Urbana. That's the game I've played. So here we are. If you want to revisit it, great. But at least you've had the decency to let me express myself in this situation. Thank you.
Thank
If
you.
there's any questions, I'll stay. If not, I'll disappear.
Ms. Chenoweth?
It doesn't make sense to me why you cannot build what you have built on the rest of the block, which acknowledges the setbacks throughout. Everything else on the block is consistent with our zoning ordinance.
Danielle, we could. The difference is this. The land over there is $1.5 million per acre. And if you question my number, I will show you sales receipts that will prove that number to you. We have paid between $30 and $41 per square foot for the last 9 properties that we have built. Now you do your multiplication. Walmart's out here is talking about $15,000 or $20,000 or whatever. I don't know. It is a completely different ball game on the side of campus. So that if you are going to make cash flow, you have to have an intensity level to pay for these things. Now, if we had built with B3U, okay, we could have done it. You're right. On that land, let me include all of it, which would be 1010, 1012, 1012 and a half, 1014, 1016 West Main, and 306 and 308 North Harvey. All of those properties. We have 1.1 million in that, and it's not an acre. But in those properties, we have $1.1 million, okay? If we get a simple variation of 8 feet or 5 feet, we can probably put in about 66 apartments. If we don't get that variation, we will probably put in about 46 apartments. There will be a difference of 20 apartments because of 8 feet or 5 feet. And that is the answer to your question, Danielle.
A follow-up question. You say that the thing that's driving your request is parking requirements?
Absolutely.
If
Now,
we reduce the parking requirement, would that take care of your concerns?
okay. Under the B3U, as I understand it, for a single-bedroom unit, you need 1 parking spot.
Correct.
For a 2-bedroom unit, you need 1 bedroom parking spot.
Correct.
And so on up the line. However, it has been our practice to not build 3 or 4 bedroom apartments. We see those as extensions of fraternities, and we do not want that crowd. So and not only that, there is a very good market for single bedrooms because nobody else builds them, okay? So we have been probably the leading builder of single bedroom units. That means we pay 1 parking spot for every apartment we have. Up until now, we've been willing to do that. Here was a possibility that just with, on one side it would be physically 8 more feet, and the other side physically, I think it might have been 10 feet, whatever. We could get 20 more apartments. If you're in the development business, would you go for it? Particularly if you felt it was a minor variation, and particularly if you didn't think you had to go to council. And the answer is yes, you'd do it. And so that's how we got, I don't know if you enjoyed my paper. I tried to do it in Big Bird fashion. How do you get from there to here, and how do you get from here to there? I tried to do it in a style that maybe might at least be interesting to read. I don't know. But I attempted that, okay? So I don't know if I've answered your question correctly, but I've tried.
The question is, if we reduce the parking requirements for the single bedrooms, would you be able to do the project?
Well, now that's an interesting question, because the paper I gave you said maybe we ought to ask for CCD, okay? Okay, CCD emphasizes commerce, not bedrooms. Now, even though Gregory Place, you approved a variation for bedrooms, if you give me a CCD, I've got to come back to you and ask for a variation for residents. So I'm back in the bear trap again. So what happens if I come around again and you hit me again? I'm dead.
That doesn't actually answer my question, which is if...
Oh, my understanding is, and I stand...
So say you needed 3/4 of a
my
parking
understanding
space
is
per
that
bedroom.
CCD asked for 3/4 of a bedroom. And that would be a big benefit to us.
So you'd be able to build with the current setbacks as legislated if we reduce the parking requirement?
Okay, Danielle, you're correct, except
Okay.
for one thing.
What's that?
This is my mistake. I take responsibility for this. Because of the encouragement I was receiving from planning and codes, we decided to take our chance, which we always do, to go ahead and design the building. So we have working drawings, we have steel drawings, we have calculations, we even have the batter board set to start digging, which we were going to do the morning after the meeting, and which we were led to believe we're probably going to get an approval, okay? So now, if we go back to B3U, some of the drawing may be saved, but a large part of the drawing will be thrown away, and we start out all over again. And probably, we'll start out all over again.
Just final statement. It's my legal understanding that when we look at major variances, which is what this was, that we have to look at what the particular special circumstance is. Because we're not legislating just for you, we're legislating for the entire district, and we set precedents every single time. So if there's some special circumstance that requires us to bend to the rules, so to speak, and allow the variance, then we're able to do that without necessarily opening the doors for that with every other thing in that district. So no case was made, zero case was made by your representatives last week. Zero case was actually made by staff, in my opinion. Zero case was made in this situation for it to be a special circumstance. We were told that the special circumstance was that it's on a corner. That's not a special circumstance. So I'm very sorry that you've been caught in a situation where the first time council heard of this was 2 days before we voted on it. But you have been hearing from staff other things. And having just finished a building project myself, and having done all of the work before certain things came before this council, I understand the situation that you're in. I guess my final question is...
Well, let me answer that one. Mm-hmm. Do you think that your planning staff and do you think your code staff are so dumb as to not have heard us talk about economic feasibility, the use of density? I have to go back and look, but I think the word density showed up in our request. And so I don't think you did your homework. And when you don't ask your planning department or Bruce or the people who support you, this is a city problem. This is not my problem.
I don't think our staff is stupid. My question for you is, if the variance was granted on Harvey Street but not Main Street, which I think was the greater concern, would you be able to go forward with your project? That's all my questions.
Well, what is across on Harvey Street?
Across the street from Harvey Street is a parking lot. It's
University,
also
right?
Mm-hmm,
On campus,
it
right?
abuts, and it's also if you go north of your property, there's a porch that sticks out the same depth as what you're intending to do. So that was the purpose of my question.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because the 3 houses that we knocked down all had steps that went right to the sidewalk. So even though we'd asked for a variation, we were going to improve that situation from what it had been previously.
Okay, Mr. Roberts.
All right, I think that the City Council looked at the variance request based on the facts that Danielle just described. A corner lot, of which we have probably 2,000 in the city, has a known setback, and this lot had no specific unique quality by which we could see the variance should be granted. there wasn't a tree in the way, there wasn't a strange shape, or there wasn't a sewer line that prohibited building and construction on a certain part of the property. It looked like a typical rectangular plain lot. So it was very difficult to imagine what specific reason would be used to grant the variance. Now, in the discussion tonight, the only specific unique situation concerning this lot seems basically to be the price of the lot, the cost of construction, as compared to, I imagine, what was the cost of construction on 3 other apartment buildings which you already own on Main Street on the same block, 2 or 3. Is that true?
Who had the change of viewpoint? The city did. The city created a CCD with less setback and with less parking requirement. And the staff that I dealt with said, well, you know, they allowed it down there. I don't see why they wouldn't allow it there. So it wasn't me that changed the view of setbacks. It was the city by creating a new zoning.
Well, I don't believe that the lot that you're talking about, you mean the lot that you have was zoned under a different configuration, B3U.
Well, do we live with the past, or do we live with the changes that the city is making? The fact remains, the CCD represented the new thinking about zoning in the area that borders university property, or in fact is university property. I didn't change that. The city developed that. They were the ones that said, we need more density. They were the ones who said, we're going to use less setbacks. They were the ones who said we're going to use a lower parking restriction. Now, why shouldn't I ask? Why shouldn't I ask for a variation to try to be treated equally?
I have one more question, and it is that if the city allowed the variance on the Harvey Street side, but not the Main Street side, could you build your structure?
We've got to redesign the structure.
If the city allowed this structure, particular structure, to be built with a variance, what would you do with the next phase of your project, which has not been designed yet?
It would be a duplicate. If I can't do a duplicate, I cancel the project.
If we would allow a variance on this building, but requested you to return to honor the setback requirements in your zoning district on that property for the second phase, you would not do the project.
That's right.
Would you call that, what I'm suggesting, what I'm trying to look for here is a compromise, which we can help you proceed with your project. But a compromise means that we're working together to try to solve a problem.
But your compromise wants me to go back and spend more money on redesign. Now, if I'm going to go back and redesign, I'm just going to go back to B3U and do the best I can. And forget it. I will never come back to you again with a variance on this property. I mean, here I trusted the system. I trusted the planners. I trusted what I was hearing. I trusted that your initiative was to get more density on the west side. Now, that is my mistake. And I'm not going to make that mistake again.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Next is old business. Is there any old business?
I'd like to move for reconsideration in ordinance that we just discussed.
I would second that.
There's 2. Which one are you
Okay,
referring to?
so there's a motion by Mr. Lewis and seconded by Ms. Stevenson to reconsider the variance for Mr. Wakeland that was voted on at the last council meeting. Is that correct? Ms. Chenoweth.
There are two votes that were taken. Could we clarify which one we're voting on first?
I
There's
think-
Harvey Street and there's Main Street.
Well, I don't have that in front of me.
The
Could
criteria
you
was
clarify
both
that?
of them.
They're in the minutes.
I'd like to speak to it for 1 second, please.
There.
Okay, I see right here.
Both required setbacks.
Mics, please.
Both of them.
Use your mic.
Both required 15-foot setbacks. Were 15-foot setbacks in both cases, is that correct? And what he was asking for was a 53% deviation, is my understanding. I'd just like to add to what Mr. Wakeland just brought up to you. Being in the area of design myself, I recognize when you go to a situation where you have to deal with public codes and requirements. And as I listened to his discussion, I can appreciate why we were confused last time. We had an initial response, and people were scratching their head, trying to figure out where to go from here. As I thought about it, and as I listened to what he had to say, he got caught in a situation where we are in the process of change. And he listened to our design people, our code people, and our representatives, and came out with his best shot for the project that he had. The problem is, as Mrs. Chenoweth just pointed out, if we elect to go to a deviation, we set a precedence for everything else in the area. My question is, how do we logically come to the resolve for this situation where we, as a body, I'm talking about design people, city council, and all of us, have two different views of what this ought to be? And if our conclusion was that it was for one reason, and in reality it was for another reason, then to me, we're putting our contractors in a very precarious situation, no matter who they might be. For us to make up our mind as to what we're going to do with the ordinances and the codes later on down the road, when the guy's got to get busy getting the job done. I just wanted to bring that out, and it seems like, we've got these criterias that, well, they got to be like everything else. But if you're talking about change, and you're talking about what you plan to do in the future, if density was an issue, the design people addressed that, and they needed to do certain things to get there. Our people encouraged them. Do we support our people, or we just capriciously decide that's not the way it's going to be? That's my conclusion.
Ms. Stevenson?
Yeah. We talked last week about how we want to bring businesses here. I think when people sit here and watch the council deny people who have been in the business of developing in Urbana for years, and we deny a request from them, what message does that send to people that want to develop here? It just sends the wrong message. If we want to keep what we have, we need to, and they've been encouraged to do so by other parties, we need to carefully study what we're doing before we make people want to run away from Urbana.
Ms. Barnes?
Robert, you brought up a question with regard to the impact of well, Danielle, you initially brought it up about, well, if we say yes to Mr. Wakeland in this case, then we'll be setting precedent for that area in the future. And I guess, what is the downside of that? Because the precedent that I think we're comfortable, at least when you look at our plan, we want mixed use, higher density, close to campus, and probably 15-foot setbacks or large setbacks in that kind of area probably isn't what we want anyway moving forward, because we want to see that to become kind of a busy hubbub of people walking around, purchasing services, using services. And granted, this is not the best thing that could be put there. I agree. It's not the best. I think it'd be better to have a 6-story building with with first floor being, businesses and services. That, I'd prefer that. But frankly, that's not quite where we're at yet with that part of the neighborhood. So I guess I would see this as a stepping stone to helping us to, gain greater density and gain an opportunity for more businesses in that area.
Ms. Chenoweth.
I want to respond to Lynn's question because I think it's a good one. Yes, I support density next to the campus. And I also support design standards, as we've talked about, and the mayor's talked about. The issue is that I don't make, and I don't think it's very responsible to make decisions for a zoning classification over the course of 2 days. That's just not, I appreciate wanting to move forward with this quickly, and council has said, and in some ways it perhaps is it's not necessarily the fault of staff, but a kind of structural circumstance we found ourselves in. We have been extremely short-staffed for a long time. It's taken us a long time to complete the comprehensive plan, and it's taken us a while to move forward with the zoning changes that come from the comprehensive plan. And I guess I'm really uncomfortable with this idea that we would implement our comprehensive plan through piecemeal variances that we find out about, and then 2 days later we're expected to vote on, and we set precedents for a whole area. I'm not sure exactly what B3U should look like. I think there's a lot of information on the table and vision there that we could work with, but and perhaps if the tricky thing in this situation is I do support density in the area, and yet I don't support this particular process for doing it. And that has been the trick. And this vote died for lack of a second, despite the fact that we discussed it. That says something about what clear situation it was. So I think that this is not the right way to do things, and I wish that there was a better alternative than what we have on the table.
Mr. Lewis.
You mentioned downside of this project or whatever, and setting the precedents for the area. If there's a potential for higher density, that's what we're asking for, and we're saying that's the direction we want to go, I don't see any reason why it would be a downside by having this higher density area in this one area. Because look, what are you going to do? You're going to take all the other buildings, tear them down, and build them differently or something? I don't see where it's going to be a big issue.
Ms. Barnes.
I guess I think as a council, I hear what Danielle is saying. I don't think this is like the greatest way of going about it. But I guess, when faced with a situation right now, what we're presented with is we have to weigh the pros and cons. And is moving ahead, are there more cons to moving ahead than there are cons to continuing or saying no to this project? And I guess I would still advocate that in balance, that the pros for saying yes to this project outweigh the cons of a refusal of the project. So I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's a perfect situation.
Mr. Roberts.
This has been a very unhelpful way to come about deciding about the future of, the future building that might take place in this corridor. It is a property that is right next to the university. It would actually behoove the city to keep it in private hands and have it tax revenue producing, than for the university perhaps to buy property and convert it into future non-taxable uses. The fact that this building, this structure, doesn't really add any commercial retail kind of space to the district, which is the whole point really of the campus development area, is to bring a mixed use of residential and retail to make it more of an upscale and integrated part of the city, is one of the things that's kind of lacking. We know that this is an apartment building that could have been designed and built according to the specifications, the setback, because this builder has done several in a row right next to it. It's not like he doesn't know what the setbacks on a corner are in this district. On the other hand, I now am seeing that the developer has already turned down 5 or 6 houses, owns the property, has purchased it, has put money and resources into it. And I guess even though from principle, I think that the city is totally correct in requiring the setbacks to be honored, because why do we have rules for development if we don't actually believe in them? I think they should be applied. I think they're public. They're known, and you know, it's somewhat irresponsible for somebody to build something larger than actually you're allowed, just on hearsay. On the other hand, we have a situation here where this project is probably going to be going belly up, or well, maybe it won't. Maybe it won't be belly up. It'll just come in late if it was to meet the setback requirements. But now I'm thinking that for 5 feet or 8 feet or 10 feet, is the city cutting off its nose to spite its face? In other words, are we too rigid, and are we going to, for just out of just pure idealism or propriety, refuse the project on principle? Or are we going to say, well, okay, changes are appropriate, we need to rethink, and I wouldn't go so far as saying that it's time to come up with like a new zoning pattern for the district. Maybe some clarification about how we'd like to see it used would be useful. But I'm wondering if could it be useful to deny this project and scuttle it when we'd actually rather have something built? And I guess maybe the one redeeming quality, maybe there's 2 redeeming qualities about this process. One is that of the plans that we've seen, it seems to be Mr. Wakeland's better plan as far as how it looks. He's got a new architect, and this plan actually meets some of the architectural features that we're actually kind of promoting for a higher density, nicer looking kind of apartment. And I noticed that some of the materials that are being used, and the way the parking is arranged, the future landscaping, actually do meet some of those hoped for goals that the city has. And secondly, I have to give Mr. Wakeland some credit for actually wanting to dialogue with the city further about it and not just have a temper tantrum. We can't come to, I mean, I've only sat on city council for a year. I haven't done too much development work, and I don't necessarily track every project that comes up through the planning office, but I think from now on I'm going to start tracking those planning meetings with a lot greater care, because I wonder sometimes why the commissions and the variance, the zoning review board comes up with the decisions that they do. I read their minutes, but I wonder, sometimes their decisions seem to fly in the face of what you would expect for maintaining the city code. Because, in almost every instance where a variance is requested, they're approved. And I think I think maybe I've kind of gotten tired of what looked like just constant, rubber stamping approval. But those things are things that could be worked out, and with maybe talking with our staff to a higher degree. So when it comes down to the question of how mad I am, and would I change my opinion about this project and allow something that's a little different, I think that City Council needs to think about what's most appropriate here, and what's forward-looking, and what's going to bring taxable income to the city. And even though I'm not necessarily thrilled, I'm thinking that it's a worthy question.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Lewis and seconded by Ms. Stevenson. And looking back through the minutes, there were two separate ordinances. So did you want to make two separate motions? Did you want to specify? It's right here. It was ordinance number two, it's on page 6 of the minutes, right?
No, it's page 4 of the minutes, ordinance number 2005-12-174, and ordinance number 2005-12-17.
Okay, but on page 6 is when the final motions were made.
Correct. Because those first two weren't seconded.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So do you want to take this one?
Well, that's number 2005.
And then do a separate motion for that one? Is that your intent? Okay, I guess the motion is on ordinance number 2005-12-174. Is there any further discussion on that? I guess we'll have a roll call vote.
And that's the Main Street setback.
Yeah,
That's what it says.
right. But there should be two separate
There are.
motions. It's not just all one motion, I
Right.
believe.
Right.
So could the clerk please call the roll, unless there's any more discussion on this? Would you call the roll, please? This is on, your motion was to rescind,
No, to reconsider.
to reconsider.
That maybe we should be making it a little more specific.
Yes, we should be very specific. Would you want to suggest some language, Mr. Getz, on how we're going to word this? Is it just to vote directly on the ordinance, or do you have to rescind the previous motion?
The motion to reconsider is, in a sense, a rescission of that vote. So the proper motion would be, I hereby move to reconsider the vote on ordinance such and such.
And then we
that
would
be
take a vote.
seconded. Yes, that could be debated. And then you would take a vote on the reconsideration. Then you would need a separate vote to move to approve.
The ordinance?
Yes,
We
because
do
otherwise.
one for each ordinance. Okay.
Correct, and you need
All
two
right.
votes, one to reconsider. What that does is then bring it back to the council, and then the next motion for approval, which would be moved and seconded, is the actual approval of that ordinance then.
Okay, then, the motion is to reconsider the motion on ordinance number 2005-12-174. This is a motion by Mr. Lewis,
You're not reconsidering the motion, you're reconsidering the vote.
reconsidering the vote on ordinance number 2005-12-174. It's a motion by Mr. Lewis, seconded by Ms. Stevenson. Is there any discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Excuse me, the yes vote is you agree.
Yes, a yes
Reconsideration.
vote is to reconsider the vote that was taken last council meeting.
Alderpersons Barnes,
Yes?
Chenoweth,
Yes?
Lewis,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Stevenson.
Yes.
Motion carries. Now, is there a motion to approve ordinance number 2005-12-174?
So moved.
And I would second that.
It's a motion by Mr. Lewis and seconded by Mr. Roberts. Is there any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderpersons Barnes,
Yes?
Chenoweth,
No.
Lewis,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Stevenson.
Yes.
The motion carries. Would you like to proceed, Mr. Lewis, or would you like me to?
There's an ordinance number 2005-12-175 to rescind
Reconsider the vote.
reconsider the vote.
Second?
Okay, there's a motion by Mr. Lewis and seconded by Ms. Stevenson to reconsider the vote on ordinance number 2005-12-175. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderpersons Barnes,
Yes?
Chenoweth,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Stevenson.
Yes.
Okay, the motion to reconsider carries. You have another motion, Mr.
I'd like
Lewis?
to move the ordinance number 2005-12-175 be placed up for vote.
What do you want to say, be approved?
Be approved.
Okay, this is
Second?
a motion by Mr. Lewis and seconded by Ms. Stevenson to approve ordinance number 2005-12-175. Is there any discussion? If not, would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderpersons Barnes,
Yes?
Chenoweth,
Yes.
Lewis,
Yes.
Roberts,
Yes.
Stevenson.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I wish to share with the council, my belief is that a motion of reconsideration does not require that this matter be placed on the agenda, because this was held at the last meeting, and a vote was taken at that meeting, and that a reconsideration stands apart from other matters placed on the agenda. But I also want to share with you that that may be an open question, and therefore I will be doing some research on that, and if I find that there is other authority or case law on that to the contrary, we may need to bring that back before the council at a future date.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to reports of standing committees.
May I make a quick comment? Thank you, and we have a responsibility to tell you exactly what we're going to do now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
I guess
All right. Reports of standing committees. Who was the chair of the standing? That was Ms. Barnes. All right, Ms.
Okay.
Barnes, please
And I do have a
proceed.
report from the Committee of the Whole, which met last week. We have a total of 8 items here, and I would like to take the first 3 in omnibus fashion, and so I'll read all 3, and then I'll make the motion. Is that good with the council?
acceptable to me.
Resolution number 2005-12-024R, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation. Resolution number 2005-12-025R, a resolution providing for the installation of traffic signals at Lincoln Avenue. And then finally, resolution number 2005-12-026R, a resolution for improvement by municipality under the Illinois Highway Code. And on behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I so move all 3.
I would second that.
Motion by Ms. Barnes and seconded by Mr. Roberts. Is there any discussion?
Real quick.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Just briefly, when I ran for council 5 years ago, I heard 3 things very clearly that my constituents in West Urbana wanted. They wanted expand the library fully, make Lincoln Avenue safer for us to cross so we don't feel like chickens crossing the road, and revitalize downtown. So we expanded the library fully, and it's quite beautiful to visit there. We're on track to making Lincoln Avenue significantly safer, and Charlie and I both spoke with Public Works last week about some plans that they'll be bringing forward to council, having to do with adding a 10-foot bike path on the west side of the street. If we have cooperation with the university, I certainly hope that the university comes to the table cooperatively on that. And a big piece of safety is installing lights at Nevada and Pennsylvania and Illinois Street. So number 2, we'll soon have a little checkbox next to it. Yeah, we did number 2. So we're on to downtown revitalization, so we should get busy on that one soon. Thanks.
Mr. Roberts.
One of my larger concerns was going to a three-lane marking for the Lincoln Street and what the effect of bus traffic and bus stops along the highway would have on the flow of traffic. Since at least 2 and probably 3 bus routes that are in the MTD campus area use Lincoln Avenue on a consistent basis, and there are several stops which they have, and any stop might have a blockage of one-lane traffic for up to like 3 to 4 minutes as people are disembarking and getting on and taking their bicycles off bicycle racks. And I've learned from the planning department engineer, one of the engineers in the planning department, that the city has talked to the university and they have agreed to reduce the number of stops on Lincoln Avenue, which I think would considerably, if that's true, it would considerably change the concern I have about the number of delays that motorists might expect to have because of the buses. So considering that that's happening, I think that the planning for Lincoln Avenue is actually starting to gel, and some of the bigger concerns about traffic flow are being answered, so I think it's very positive.
Okay, there's a motion by Ms. Barnes, seconded by Mr. Roberts, to approve these resolutions number 2005-12-024R, 2005-12-025R, and 2005-12-026R. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. Ms. Barnes?
Next item is number D, with motion approving West Urbana Neighborhood Association Specialty Street Name Sign Request. On behalf of the Committee of the Whole, I so move.
Okay, that's a motion by Ms. Barnes and seconded by Mr. Lewis. Is there any discussion? Ms. Stevenson? No. Oh. All right. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion carries. Next, we have, well, go ahead, Ms. Barnes.
Yes.
Thank you.